All right, welcome to SLiTHER 46. Today I am very pleased to be joined by my colleague Wendy Hill, who is the director of the Hanson Inclusive STEM Center at Lafayette College. We're going to talk a little bit today about a climate survey that we conducted in the fall of students in the chemistry department. I do want to make sure I thank a few people before we dig into this. I had a group of colleagues in the department, Professor Becky Miller, Professor Dan Griffith, and Professor Ariel Mensch, who were part of the team that worked on the climate survey here. But mostly I need to thank Wendy. I think we would have done this climate survey without her, and it would have gone horribly and been terrible, and we would have learned nothing. So she made this a very wonderful and very useful kind of thing. So she was great. I think that sums it up. So I think with that, Wendy, we'll turn it over to you to screen share and get us rolling through a little presentation. I think our participants here should feel free to dump things into the chat or interrupt us with questions as we go, and we'll see where that gets us.
Great. So hopefully everybody's seeing the first slide. As Chip mentioned, I'm the director of a new center at Lafayette. It's called the Hanson Center for Inclusive STEM Education, and partnered with Chip and his colleagues in the chemistry department. So Chip, you want to just kind of go through what we're going to get through, hopefully?
I can do that, although you're going to have to give me the bullet points, I think. You know, a lot of the background here comes from the department, really wanted to emphasize our commitment to issues of DEIJ. And we wanted to talk about, that a little bit, and talk about the Hanson Center, what their mission and program is, just give you a little background and feel for what's going on there. And then really dive into the climate study. In particular, talking about setting up the climate study, what we did, what we were asking, why we did it. We will dive a little bit into the statistics, and we can probably go into those a little bit deeper if anyone wants to in terms of results. But we will highlight some of the findings and talk about some of the action steps the department is going to do. And certainly, I definitely think this is something good for the department to do, so we can talk about the benefits and challenges along the way. So probably around April, May of 2020, during COVID times, one of the things the department was able to do was craft a departmental statement on diversity, equity, and inclusion. Something we felt was important, and we didn't really advertise well to students. So this is something that has hit our webpage, and it's an important part of who we are. I think Wendy has picked out one particular sentence she really likes in this, if I recall correctly, and that is, we want to be an environment where students, no matter what their background is, where they're coming from, can feel like they're part of the department and they're able to perform best.
The slides got ahead of me there.
That's okay. These things happen.
Okay. Yeah. So let me just kind of go back here. There we go. Yeah, there's the one sentence. So I think that was what the department really thought is a goal, and that the climate study would help make sure that you're working towards that goal. So you want me to over, or
I can do this, and then you can take over from here, I think. So as I mentioned in the post on Viper, this idea, I'd love to say I was original and came up with it myself, but it stemmed from an Organometallic Gordon conference, and I happened to be on the advisory board for the Hanson Center. And after our first meeting in the fall, I said to Wendy, Wendy, I've got this crazy idea. What do you think about it? And she's like, yes, another department or two has done it. you'd be the first in natural sciences. Let's go. So it was really great that, there was not only no resistance, there was incredible support for doing this. And from there, we put together a climate survey that Wendy's going to tell you about now.
Yeah, so let me just spend a little bit of time just talking about what the Hanson Center is so that you can understand how this was such a natural partnership with the chemistry department. So this is a relatively new center at Lafayette College. I'm the inaugural full-time director of the center and just was appointed this past July. This center works to advance both our understanding and practices of diversity, equity, and inclusion in STEM. I'm trained as a neuroscientist. I've been on the faculty for many years. I've also had administrative roles. So I was chair of the neuroscience program and also was previously the provost and dean of the faculty. Really excited to be leading the Hanson Center because it really is a distinctive part of the college where what our goal is to cultivate a STEM ecosystem where you don't just survive in STEM, you thrive in STEM. And so with that kind of as the backdrop, we are a research and practice center that has sort of three buckets of things that we try to do. Supporting students and faculty with historically excluded identities. So for example, we have a signature program that's a strength-based summer bridge program for incoming first-year students. We also work directly with faculty in the development of inclusive pedagogies and curriculum. And the climate study initiative really fits into this category, I would say. And then we do things where we advance inclusive STEM studies, teaching and research, where we're turning the lens on STEM and looking at it through approaches such as sociology, Africana studies, women and gender studies, to look at the policies, practices, and products that we as STEM professionals provide. And so the Department Climate Studies are a particular approach that the Hanson Center has started. This is oftentimes when we think of climate studies, they're big climate studies, right? They're of the whole college or university. And these are really targeted to STEM departments and programs. And as Chip said, the chemistry department is the first natural science department we've done. We've done 4 engineering departments. They have been really, really helpful, I think, to the department gaining more insight about the students. So we look at a climate study as the ability to take the temperature of students about their perceptions and experiences in the department, especially regarding diversity, equity, inclusion. And from the findings, we want to recognize and celebrate what is being done well, and then to take action in areas needing improvement. And I would say that's a critical component of this. The Hanson Center really wants these studies to launch a plan for how to take action rather than just something that sits on the shelf or you put inside a file cabinet. So Chip, you want to mention about how we work together, give them some ideas of the process?
Absolutely. So as I mentioned previously, there were a small group of us, and we came up with some just general ideas of what sort of things we wanted to ask about. So a small group then presented that to the department. We chatted a little bit about what we were asking, and we got the rest of the department to go on board. This did require everyone to agree to give some time in class for students to take the climate survey. So that was an important part of the process. It wasn't just oh, surprise, we're taking some of your class time. We made sure we had conversations along those lines before it happened. And then Wendy helped us take our ideas and give them actual, proper context and wording and writing to try to get to what we were after throughout our process.
Super. So let me turn to some aspects of the process. One of the things that the department has to ask and answer is who is being surveyed. So it could be that you're going to maybe just target juniors and seniors in the major. Maybe you're going to include sophomores. It does require, I think, a nice discussion among the department to think about what they want to do. For the chemistry department, they decided to survey sophomores to seniors, and they surveyed both majors and non-majors. So these were students in chemistry classes. And that resulted in an N of 155 students.
And let me give just a tiny bit of context to that. We have in our junior and senior class majors, probably about 30 students in total, maybe 35. And we just didn't want to get into the statistics of small numbers there and get data that might not be totally meaningful. So we opted to go down to sophomores, realizing that would be many students that were not majors in the Orgo sequence. But I think that was the right call.
So then another question is when you do this. So sort of earlier in the semester, better than later in the semester, I would say. We've had some departments do them in October. We just did one in February. There might be another month that seems reasonable to do a survey. Oh my gosh, this is like got a little gnome of its own here. So the chemistry department did theirs in October. So it was just last fall. And then another thing to ask and answer is about how you survey, how this is administered. And as Chip mentioned, they did it as part of a class. We also had a department that did it as a homework assignment. I don't think you're going to be surprised that there were more participants when it was done during class. I think it also sends a nice message to students when faculty take out time and to administer the survey during class. And students have commented in the survey how appreciative they were that the faculty took time. It meant something to them that they were really committed to this because they used class time for it. So the survey has 5 sections. The first part of it is sort of a broad set of questions that are really asking about support for diversity, equity, inclusion at Lafayette writ large, so kind of a broad lens. The next 3 sections are really focused on the department. Section 2 are we call I feel questions, because they typically start with those 2 words. So I feel a sense of belonging in the chemistry department. I feel comfortable asking questions in the chemistry department, or I feel connected. And they are answered on a 1 to 5 Likert scale, with 1 being strongly disagree and 5 being strongly agree. The third section is the to me section, which has adjectives that are anchored on a 1 to 5 scale. And the students are answering how the department feels to them based on these 2 adjectives that are anchored. Unwelcoming to welcoming, for example, sexist, non-sexist, racist, non-racist, competitive, collaborative, and others. And then we always include a section, this is section 4, that's department generated. And so that was what Chip was referring to about how we work together to, first of all, identify what general topics the department wanted to ask questions about, and then to design the question in a way that were keeping with best practices with survey questions. And the chemistry department developed questions about academic and research experiences. And then the final section are demographic questions. So questions about class year, social identities, such as gender, race, ethnicity, sexual orientation, first gen status, etc. So The Hanson Center analyzes all the results. So we do both quantitative analyses on those Likert scale questions, both descriptive and inferential statistics. We also have open-ended questions, so those are more qualitative kinds of questions, and the center does content analysis, and then also provides some student voice so that you kind of bring to life what the comments were about. And I do want to say that even though the department sort of broadened who was in the survey, it's still a relatively small sample size. So for example, we couldn't do any kind of intersectional identity on these data while still keeping anonymity. So we couldn't look at both race and gender together. So we typically just have two groups that you're comparing versus being able to look at something with an intersectional lens. And then typically in these studies, we look for patterns. We look for patterns across questions. There are typically positive things that we celebrate. And then there's areas that are needing to be improved that we talk about with the department. And then there's also, despite getting a lot of data, we often need to have some kind of follow-up to better understand the data. So for example, the Hanson Center has conducted focus groups as a follow-up to climate studies to really dive into some of the findings directly with students. Okay, so what I want to do is dive into just some examples of the findings from the chemistry department. This is just a small slice, but we wanted to give you a sense for the kinds of information that the department got, and then talk about the action steps. All right, so this is just an overall graph that shows the average response to these 10 questions. This is the I feel section. So you see I feel included, I feel a sense of belonging. The Likert scale was 1 to 5, with 1 being strongly disagree and 5 being agree. You see 2 relatively low bars there. That's actually a good thing, given that the questions are written. I have felt, my mouse is so sensitive today. I have felt discriminated against. So that's strongly disagree. That's a good thing, obviously. And then number 8 is I feel isolated, and that's also being scored low. So you can see most of the responses are averaging 4 or above in this overall average. Then what we do is to look at the responses based on social identity. And what you see in these curves, these graphs, are, first of all, that kind of ghost bar in the background that shows you the overall averages. And then for this one, we're showing you the average response for white students and the students of color. So because of relatively small samples, we can't separate out by different races and ethnicities. So these are taken together. And in this sample, I think it's like 70% white and 30% students of color. And then above each of these bars are the p-values for an independent t-test. And if it is less than 0.05, you see that it's in red. And if it's not, it's in black. And if it's approaching significance, you see it sort of in a gold color. And so hopefully this gives you a little bit of visual representation of the different responses based on the social identity of race, ethnicity. So for example, in question 1, I feel included in the chemistry department. Overall average is about a 4.5, and you can see, though, that students of color feel significantly less included. It's still a good number in terms of the overall average, but that is significant. The next one shows you the average for male as compared to female identifying students. Again, same kind of format. If it's a p-value less than 0.05 above those bars, you see that those are significant. And here, and I don't know what your chemistry departments are like. Ours is heavily female in terms of the students. So 2/3 of the respondents were female identifying, 1/3 were male. And yet what you're seeing is the females are saying that they feel less comfortable participating in class, and they feel less comfortable asking questions. Still a relatively high Likert response, but significantly less than the males. There were some open-ended questions. As I said, this is an example of one of them. What has fostered your sense of belonging in the department? We gave some examples of responses that they might put. And here's the overall pattern that we saw. And I will say this one was, Chip, is it fair to say it was a little bit surprising with the supplemental instruction response was off the charts here, so to speak, in that students really felt that the supplemental instruction program, the SI leaders were wonderful and really influenced their sense of belonging in the department. And that was followed by office hours of the faculty with really great comments about how much they learned, how open the faculty were in helping them. TA came in next, group work, interactions with faculty, interactions with students, co-curricular programs, and then general statements about the department. We did also want to see how these comments might vary by social identity. And so this is an example of how we did that. We took each of the bars and separated it out by how many of these comments came from, for example, in the very first slice, males as compared to females. And then the white, do you see the white line that cuts across each of those? That's where the proportion of those categories would fall. And so you see then the first one for the SI comments that there were, just a few more comments from females than you would expect based on the portion of females. And we did that across the LGBTQ identifying students as compared to straight students, and then white versus students of color as a way to visualize how these comments might vary based on social identity. Another question we asked was what you think the department could do differently to create a more supportive and inclusive environment for everyone. And the response was coded such that co-curricular programming was one of the top areas suggested by the students. Sort of tied with that were comments about wanting the department to be more explicit around its DEI work and support for diversity, equity, inclusion. Students were, the next one is representation. They were interested in having the department be more representative of the student body. Next is the competitive environment related to interactions with students, then inclusive work, group work, and wanting some greater support for organizations and students of color organizations. So those were some of the standard kinds of climate studies that the Hanson Center has used. We've pulled these from the literature and other kinds of climate studies. This next section is the one that the department created, questions of their own. As I said, they were about academic experiences and research experiences. And we're going to show you some of the responses to the research questions. This one was asking about how difficult it was to join a research group. And you'll see that there were 33 responses. This is because the students from that general group of 155 was only to those who answered yes, that they had been involved in research that answered these. And you can see that for this response, how difficult it was. The students made full use of the Likert scale. So we have some of them strongly disagreeing to some of them strongly agreeing to the difficulty. We asked them how they participated in research, and they could check all that apply. And you can see that a number of them have conducted research through classes. Some of them have done it through paid position. One of our research programs is called the Excel program. And then we saw that a little over 40% had been involved in research through a volunteer position. This was, I think, a nice capture of some data that helped the department better understand kind of the flow of students into doing research. And I think almost all the students who mentioned that they had done volunteer then had also done either a course or been paid. I have had primarily positive interactions with Research Mentor. You can see just how positive doing research is. This is really wonderful to see, and lots of positive comments associated with this. And here too was another question in which we got a broad range of responses. And the question was, I would feel comfortable changing research groups if I wanted to. And so you see that some students felt very comfortable, they've strongly agreed, and some strongly disagreed. And with the comment analysis, it was really interesting. Some students felt like they wouldn't leave the lab because they're in the midst of doing something really great and they were, doing this procedure and they wanted to see it through. And others said they would feel guilty leaving a lab. And so we got lots of different views for why they put their answer that they did. So the general summary, and again, there was lots and lots of other data that was analyzed. The quantitative responses were very positive, generally 4 or above. There were some differences in experiences based on identity, as I showed you a couple of them. There were many positive comments about the department and the faculty. The open-ended questions really provided the opportunity for the students to speak glowingly, I would say, about the faculty. The supplemental instruction was clear, created a strong sense of community for the students, and they really appreciated this academic support. We had clear evidence from the survey that students value diversity, equity, and inclusion, and they wanted to see more explicitness on the part of the faculty around their commitment, and they recommended that the faculty reflect the diversity of the student body. They had great suggestions for ways to enhance the sense of belonging and attract historically minoritized groups, and it was clear that the research experiences were strongly positive and promote a sense of community among the students. And the department is considering ways to promote this opportunity and attract greater representation in the research. So what happens after we do these studies is that then we work with the department to develop action steps, and we think of them in 3 different buckets: something that can be done, immediately, low-hanging fruit, so to speak, short-term and long-term, and we serve as a resource to the department. And so, Chip, I'm going to turn it over to you so you can talk about what the chemistry department is planning to do as your action steps.
All right. Thank you, Wendy. You can just go ahead and bring up everything here and I'll kind of talk through them. Conveniently, the Hanson Center is really great at bringing in wonderful speakers related to inclusiveness in STEM. And the department has made a commitment to send a large faculty contingent to at least one, if not more, of these talks every semester. And tied to that, we do coming up here in about a half an hour, actually, a Wednesday afternoon cookie time with our students. And the idea is that, after one of these events, we're going to talk to students about what we learned, what they heard. Hopefully they go to them also. Just so they see that, this is something that we are constantly thinking about and doing everything we can to make improvements overall. So that's one step that we've taken and are committed to doing as we go on. We've also provided some interesting spaces for students that weren't available previously. We had a office that was occasionally occupied by an adjunct that has been converted to a student lounge that they have access to now. And from what I saw earlier today, they enjoy it greatly. There were, I think, 5 or 6 of them in there doing various and sundry things. We've also opened up some ways to communicate with students better. One of them is having a departmental Slack channel, so they can contact us through that anytime. And that actually has paid great dividends just in the past 24 hours or so. This is something that the department was a little surprised by. The president of the college sent out an email, I want to say it was yesterday, condemning some posts on Yik Yak that had targeted a specific group of our students, and that's campus-wide in general, from what's known as a posse organization. Some of you may be familiar with that. Not too surprisingly, none of the departmental faculty were on Yik Yak or are on Yik Yak, so we weren't quite aware of this, but it gave us an opportunity to say, hey, we stand with the president that these students are important to us and they're members of our community, and we shouldn't be disparaging them in any way, shape, or form. And I've had at least one student come up to me and say, thank you for sending that out. It was short, sweet, but they knew that we heard that there was a problem and we cared, and we didn't think that something was right, and wanted to say, we're calling this out as being wrong. It shouldn't happen. So I think these open lines of communication are really important for the students. We've also made a shared Google Drive, something we didn't have before, where we can put all kinds of different things, including like summer opportunities and other things that we just can share with all students. They have access to easily, rather than just another email they can ignore. We are certainly committed to enhancing the diversity pool of applicants as much as possible. One thing that happened as a result of this, we did a town hall with students, and just a chance to share the results with them, talk about things we were doing that maybe they weren't aware of. We are actively sending faculty to conferences like Novachet in an attempt to just build relationships. We don't have any active searches going on now, but we want to build relationships for when we do have active searches. That's not something students knew, but we wanted to let them know that, yeah, we are committed. We are looking for ways to diversify our faculty. As Wendy mentioned previously, focus groups. We got a number of great questions that we want to follow up on, and we just had a full department meeting yesterday to kind of narrow down our focus of these focus groups, and that's something we're looking forward to getting a little more information on. Of course, then once we get that information, we're going to have to act on them. Part of that action might be a peer mentoring group that the Hanson Center is starting to set up. That's something I mentioned earlier, how we would have done this without the Hanson Center. It would have been terrible. I know that for a fact, because at the start of COVID, we tried to set up a peer mentoring program and it failed miserably because we didn't really know what we were doing. So this is something that I think will be great for us. I mentioned the communication earlier. I think, already students know that we want to communicate on these kind of issues. And I think that's just going to continue to open up doors and conversations and things that happen within the department. And also part of this, we thought it would be good to share this beyond. So we're doing that today. Certainly would welcome any input or questions we have on this. I think Wendy has reminded me many times, the results are generally very, very positive. I tend to be very good at focusing on the negative, and there's room for growth, and that's the important thing. And hopefully we're we're going to do growth in 5 years or so. When we do this again, we'll see that growth. So talked a little bit about this. We did the town hall with students. We summarized our main findings, talked about what kind of things we're going to be doing, that we're going to do these focus groups, so students are aware of it. That'll probably happen sometime later this spring. We did get some questions and comments from students. The area that I think resonated most with my colleagues and I was really this idea of competitiveness amongst the students, and disdain might be too strong of a word, but kind of trepidation with working in groups or working with fellow students. That's something we really want to get a little more information on. Is that something faculty are causing, or is there something we can do to try and make that experience better? But there are definitely some other areas we want to dive into a little bit deeper. So the process, if I haven't said it enough, let me say it again. Without Wendy, this is a disaster. I'm not talking about this with you today. The results have been great, but even without the numbers and the comments and all that, just the conversations we've been having spinning from this have been really, really good. The findings, Wendy has suggested that this might not have been represented in the department a few years ago. I'm relatively happy with where we are, but again, I see room for growth, and I hope we do it. We don't know exactly what we can and can't fix, but we hope we're creating a community where all of our students feel included, that they have a say, and that we're going to listen to them and make improvements everywhere and anywhere we can.
So with that, I'm going to stop sharing and see if you have any questions or comments.
I'd say go ahead, Sarah, but that's not specific enough. Go ahead, Sarah.
I'll go and then so it sounds like your department, you had pretty good buy-in, but I guess I could see certain departments where there might be people who would be reluctant to have some of these open-ended questions. Were there any comments that targeted specific faculty members, or who gets to see the results if students feel like certain people are discriminating against them? Right. Or
so the very important thing, and we made this clear to students from the start, was that department faculty would never, ever, 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 ever see their original submitted results. Wendy's the only one who's seen them, and she has filtered them as appropriate. And we thought that was important for students to know they had that anonymity so they could comment as freely as they wanted to. And I think that might have relieved any faculty fears along those lines, that they'd have to read things that would be bad. I'll let her comment as much as she wants to, and it might be nothing if there was anything super targeted or.
Well, the only thing I would add is that the Hanson Center really feels like they're working with the department. So it's the department study. So if Chip as department head wanted to share the results with the provost, that's his and his department's prerogative, but I don't do that. And I think it's fair to say that Chip, I think I heard you were going to include something of this in your annual report, but that's his decision. It's almost like the Hanson Center is a consultant to the department.
Is this something you're willing to sort of share what was developed in terms of this questionnaire with other institutions? Because not everyone has a Hanson Center accessible at all times.
I would so there's two questions embedded there. I'd be absolutely positively happy and willing to share it as long as Wendy says I can share it. I don't want to steal her hard work.
Yeah, so this is important work that I'm happy to share because I didn't develop these questions alone. They came from, looking in the literature, looking at other institutions, climate studies. So they're ones that have been validated and tested for reliability and so forth. So they aren't ones that we've created ourselves. So they're not I'm happy to share them with you. I will say there's a benefit, I think, to having an organization outside the department administer it so that it feels, I think the students are much more comfortable sharing their views because it isn't the department analyzing the results. And similarly, when we do focus groups, I'm not a member of the chemistry department. So when I go to do those focus groups, I think the students are, much freer in speaking to me. And I've done other focus groups with other STEM departments. So I would just caution you, if you're going to, use the questions, to think about who's administering it. And if you have some group in your university or college that has some kind of oversight and statistical background, that they could do the work so that it's separate from you as a department doing it.
Do you think it matters like what time of the semester the survey would be administered, or what time of the academic year?
Yeah, I do. I don't have any empirical data on this, but I think as faculty, we know the ebbs and flows of emotions and stress. And so I would steer away from the end of the semester, like December and November and kind of April and May. And so the earlier in the semester, the better. We haven't done any in September, almost feeling like that's too early, wanting to get the students kind of into the rhythm of the semester and the experience with the department. So for us, we've done them October and February. So we just did one last month for an engineering department.
And
the only tricky thing is, it just makes it harder because, as Chip said, we like to do a town hall. And so your town hall, Chip, was early February.
Yeah.
Yeah. So kind of October was when it was ministered. It gave the Hanson Center time to do all the analyses, the content analysis. And then we met with the department in December. And then they had January to really reflect on the results, so that then when we went to the town hall, they had some time to think about it and develop action steps.
And I'll just say that, the timing was, twofold affected things. First, the timing was partly I have this major issue when I have a good idea and I think it can happen. I want it to happen. So I wanted to strike in the fall semester, but that did affect my decision to exclude students, first-year students, from our general chemistry courses, because they would have had one class in the department for 3 or 4 weeks. And not to say those students don't have valuable opinions or anything, but we just didn't feel like that was the appropriate group to include at this point in time.
Hey, Chip,
one thing sorry, Sarah, just occurred to me was the nice thing, or I will say the positive thing of having a separate group doing these surveys is that we're able to look across the departments and see common themes versus a survey just being done in a silo and not really sharing it broadly. And so there are some things in the chemistry results that I wasn't surprised by because I've seen them in other departments. And so that speaks to kind of the sort of larger things that we should be doing as professors in STEM and as the Hanson Center. Sorry, Sarah.
Oh, that's okay. I was just wondering like what kind of feedback you were getting from students previously, like if you were doing like exit surveys with graduates or just sort of informal kind of.
Yeah, informal conversations at best.
Okay. I'm just curious.
Some departments here do exit surveys, or I know one department that does sort of a group interview. So there are some other ways that departments have tried to gain information about the experiences of their majors. I think the nice thing about this is that we try to have the town hall the same year that the survey's done. So the students who've taken it see the results and see that the department is taking it seriously and planning to take action as a result of it. And that's been really powerful for the students.
Any other questions or comments or things we could possibly address?
I'm wondering if you, and maybe I missed this because I came in late. Someone was literally bleeding. So,
I understand. I've been there.
And I was like, yeah, doing a little bit of first aid. But I was wondering if you separated out your chemistry or biochemistry, your majors from the many students who need to take chemistry, but for other reasons. And if the numbers were just too small or something to.
So we did that in a somewhat creative way. Because we don't officially declare majors until spring of your sophomore year. The juniors and seniors were almost exclusively majors, but we do ask at some point, are you a major or not? We do get some research students that are juniors and seniors in other majors that were included in this survey. For the sophomores, then we had to phrase the questions along the lines of, am I considering a major in chemistry or biochemistry, or have I ever considered it, and that sort of thing. So the numbers are relatively small, but Wendy did give us some numbers where it was like, yes, I'm a major, or yes, I'm considering chemistry versus the no.
And so we did all of those analyses based on that dichotomous variable.
I mean, yeah. Students, and I guess we all, make decisions, at some point along the line on kind of like an emotional or experiential thing that happens at the right time. And so I was just wondering about, if there were more negative experiences or, more criticism of how the department works by non-majors, or maybe someone would decide to not major in chemistry because of a bad experience. Because we all make decisions like that. And, if you're kind of on the fence, it doesn't take much to tip you one way or the other. But
well, I don't know how real the statistic is, but it's a number I can throw at you and we'll see what kind of context it is. I've been here 23 years. The sophomore class that just declared its majors is the largest class in my entire time here. And now future me department head is sitting here going, oh my God, how are we going to get these students into class next year? But that's future me's problem. So I don't know if that means anything or it's just a weird fluke of something. But on some levels, I could say, well, maybe this was a really positive experience for those students and made them feel like, yeah, this was the tip of the iceberg to decide this would be their home.
correlation, at least.
Yes, it's one of those things that, people are involved, so you can't do the control.
Did this did this survey require like IRB or anything like that? Approval? Or
Yeah, we went through a general IRB, but we're also not planning on using it to do research, so we didn't have to go through all the levels. Yeah. But we did go through.
Which again, I'm very thankful for Wendy for taking that side of things also. All right, well, we're coming up on the magic hour. Any last questions, comments? Thank you.
I'd love to do this in my department. So anything that you all are willing to share.
If you're not familiar with this, or you're catching this on the YouTube channel later, these all do wind up on Viper as a learning object, and what I will do is create a document there with the questions we asked and the scales and all that sort of thing. So it will become readily available, and I'll have to create an account for you, Wendy, so you can be a co-author of that with me, because I'm sure that's going to make a huge difference to you in your career as you go forward. But I do feel it's appropriate.
Let me also say, happy to help if there's questions as you want to implement something like this. If the Hanson Center can be helpful, don't hesitate to shoot me an email.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
All right. Well, I one last time have to thank Wendy for all her help, support, and effort throughout this process. Again, it would have been a disaster without her. And I think we've learned a lot, and it's been a tremendous experience for the department, and will continue to be as we continue to think about it and as we move forward. And with that, I will formally remember how to bring the recording to an end, and we will stop it.